I lost 3 years of my life, not to drugs, not to illness, to strangers living inside my head. My name is Claire Ashworth. I am a 34-year-old woman with 7 personalities sharing one body. You're probably wondering what that even means. I was too for a very long time. Let me start by telling you what my life looked like from the outside, because from the outside, nothing looked wrong. I had a flat, I had a job, I had a boyfriend, a group of friends, a mom who rang me every Sunday. I was, by most people's reckoning, completely fine. But there were mornings I woke up in my kitchen and couldn't remember walking downstairs. There were text messages on my phone, full conversations, that I had apparently sent and had absolutely no memory of. I once found a sketchbook under my bed filled with drawings, hundreds of them. Animals mostly. Strange, beautiful, detailed pencil drawings. I cannot draw. I have never been able to draw, not even a straight line. I didn't know what was happening to me. I just knew something wasn't right. And for years, I told myself it was stress, or tiredness, or just the way my mind worked. I was very good at explaining things away. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start with a diagnosis. It starts with a little girl in a house in Coventry and a childhood that I can only describe in fragments. I grew up with my mom, Sandra, and my stepfather, Derek. My mom is a kind woman. She is. But she was also a woman who was deeply in love with a deeply dangerous man, and for a long time, her love for him took up more space than her love for me. I don't say that to be cruel to her. I say it because it's true, and because understanding it is the only way any of the rest of this makes sense. Derek moved in when I was 5. I was 7 when the first thing happened. I'm not going to describe it in detail, that's not what this is about, but I will tell you that it happened regularly, and it happened for years. And no one in that house acknowledged it, not once, not ever. There was a silence in our family that was so total, so absolute. It had a kind of weight to it. You learned not to push against it. What I know now is that my mind, at 7 years old, made a decision, not a conscious one. Children don't consciously decide anything. But somewhere deep in the architecture of who I was, a wall went up. And on the other side of that wall, someone, stepped in to carry what I couldn't. That was the first one. The first altar. Her name, I would learn decades later, is Maisie. Maisie is 7 years old. She has been 7 years old for 27 years. She draws animals. I know that sounds impossible. I know it sounds like something from a film, but I need you to understand something before we go any further. Dissociative Identity Disorder is not a film. It is not dramatic. It is not people switching in front of you with different voices and different clothes and different walks like some kind of performance. Most of the time, you don't even know it's happening. That's rather the point. The whole mechanism was designed to be invisible, even to me. I sailed through secondary school in the way that traumatized children sometimes do, by being very, very good at seeming normal. I was bright. I worked hard. I had friends. I smiled a lot. Teachers liked me. One of them, Mrs. Okafor, my English teacher in year 10, actually wrote on my report that I was emotionally mature beyond her years. I've thought about that a lot since. What she was seeing as maturity was dissociation. I had learned to separate from my own feelings so completely that I appeared calm in situations where other children cried or raged or fell apart. I just wasn't there. Not really. The first time I genuinely noticed the lost time, I was 16. I came home from school on a Tuesday afternoon, and my mom told me I'd rung her from a phone box the previous Saturday in a panic, crying, saying I was lost somewhere near the canal. She'd driven to get me. We'd apparently had chips in the car on the way home. I have no memory of any of it. None. Not the phone box, not the canal, not the chips. My mom and I both agreed, without actually saying so out loud, that this hadn't happened. That was our family's way. By the time I was 18 and had left for university in Bristol, a city I'd chosen specifically because it was far from Coventry, the gaps were getting longer. I'd lose afternoons, sometimes evenings. Once a full weekend. I'd come back to myself sitting somewhere unfamiliar, wearing different clothes with no idea how I'd got there or what I'd been doing. The clothes were always clean, which somehow made it worse. It meant someone had been taking care of the body. Someone who wasn't me. I was 22 when I had my first mental health crisis. Well, my first recognized one. I was working in a coffee shop in Bristol, living with 2 flatmates, Jess and Priya, who were both lovely and both completely bewildered by me. I'd been having what I'd been calling episodes, periods where I'd feel suddenly very far away from myself, like watching my own life through glass. Then I started hearing a voice, not an external voice, not the kind that would make you think someone was in the room, an internal one, clear, calm, adult, female. It said, "You need to sit down. I'll handle this." And then there was nothing until I was sitting on the floor of the coffee shop stockroom, and my manager, Tim, lovely man, brilliant human being, was crouched next to me, looking absolutely terrified. That was the first time I went to a GP and told the full truth. Or tried to. The GP referred me to a mental health team, who referred me to a psychiatrist, who diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder within about 45 minutes of meeting me. He was not unkind. He was simply wrong. I spent the next 3 years being treated for borderline personality disorder. I took the medication, I attended the DBT group, I did everything they asked. Some of it helped with specific symptoms, the emotional flooding, the panic. But the lost time didn't stop. The voices didn't stop. And every time I raised it, I was told it was likely derealization, common in BPD, nothing to worry about. I want to be very clear here. I'm not angry at the mental health system generally. I know it is underfunded and overstretched and full of people trying their hardest, but I am angry. I am absolutely furious that DID is so poorly understood, so rarely taught, that it took 7 more years after that first crisis to get the right answer. 7 years of wrong treatment. 7 years of being given a map to the wrong country. The rock bottom came when I was 28. It came on a Wednesday night in November, which I remember with a particular, precise clarity, because I was there for the very beginning of it, and then I wasn't. I was in my flat. I'd been having a bad week. Work stress, a row with my boyfriend at the time, a phone call from my mom that had dredged up things I was not equipped to deal with. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, feeling the cold tiles through my jeans, feeling the strange, vertiginous sensation of the world pulling back from me like a wave retreating from a beach. And then I was standing in the street outside my building. It was dark. It was raining. I was in my socks. No shoes, no coat, November rain, and I was standing in the middle of the road, and there was a car, its headlights, very close, the sound of brakes, and then hands grabbing my arm and a man's voice saying something I couldn't process. He was called Marcus, a neighbor from 2 floors up. He'd been coming home from a late shift, and he'd seen me standing in the road, and he'd pulled me out of the way. I was completely nonverbal. He sat with me in the lobby for 40 minutes until I came back enough to tell him my name. He made me tea in his flat. He didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. I don't know which alter had taken over in those missing hours. I know now, having done enormous amounts of work to map my internal world, that it was probably a protector alter named Sol. Sol is, as best I can understand it, a young man, mid-20s, who comes out when the threat level inside gets high enough that he feels like he needs to get the body out of the situation. He doesn't always get it right. That night, he didn't get it right. But here's the thing about that night that I need you to hold on to. Marcus sat with me for 40 minutes in a lobby because he could see a person who needed help. He didn't know what was wrong with me. He didn't ask. He just stayed. I have thought about that night every single day since. And what it taught me is that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do for another person is simply not leave. After the incident with Marcus, I went back to my GP, a different GP this time, a woman, Dr. Patel, who actually listened to the full account of what had been happening for my entire adult life without looking at the clock once. She referred me to a trauma specialist, not a general psychiatrist, a trauma specialist. His name was Dr. Hendricks, and he was, without exaggeration, the first person in my entire life who heard what I was describing and did not look confused or concerned or quietly disbelieving. He leaned forward and he said very quietly, "What you're describing has a name." And something in me, like something that had been rigid and braced for decades, just loosened. The assessment took 4 sessions. The diagnosis was dissociative identity disorder, complex PTSD, and a formal note on the file that the BPD diagnosis was likely a misdiagnosis, as is the case for a significant number of DID patients. I cried for about 2 hours after that session. Not from grief, or not only from grief, from relief. From the extraordinary, almost physical sensation of having been believed. The work that followed was the hardest thing I have ever done. I say that as someone who survived a childhood that I've only sketched for you here. Therapy for DID is not like other therapy. You are not just working on yourself. You are essentially facilitating diplomatic relations between multiple autonomous parts of yourself who have been in conflict, or in hiding, or in complete ignorance of each other for decades. Dr. Hendricks introduced me to the concept of mapping my system, essentially learning who was in there, what their roles were, what triggered them to come forward, and how to begin building what's called internal communication. It sounds clinical when I put it that way. In practice, it looked like me sitting quietly and learning to listen inward, learning to ask rather than be afraid. Over time, I met them, all 7. There is Maisie, who is 7, who draws animals, who comes out sometimes when I'm somewhere quiet and safe, and who I think of now with nothing but tenderness. There is Saul, the protector, bristly, fierce, fiercely loyal. He has kept me alive in ways I don't fully know yet. There is Elaine, who is very precise and organized, and who, I have come to realize, wrote every to-do list I ever found on my kitchen table and couldn't remember writing. Elaine is the reason I have never missed a bill payment in my life. There is a part I know only as the quiet one, who doesn't speak, but who I feel sometimes is a kind of stillness. There are 3 others whose stories I'm still learning. That's the truth of it. This is ongoing work. This is not a finished story. It's a story I am still in the middle of every day. I'm 34 now. I have a flat in Bristol, a different one, a better one, with a balcony where I grow tomatoes with varying degrees of success. I have a job as a communications manager for a charity, which I'm good at, and which I find meaningful. I have a partner, Daniel, who knows everything, every single thing, and who, when I told him, asked me one question. What do I do if you switch and I don't realize? That question. That practical, loving, utterly non-panicked question. I could have married him on the spot, married him on, the life I have built is real. It is mine. All of mine. Every part of me that has a share in this one body and this one life. That's the thing I most want people to understand who know nothing about DID, which is most people, because we are talked about so rarely and so badly. This is not a horror story. These parts of me were not invaders. They were not demons. They were children who stepped into the dark so that I didn't have to go alone. They were the most creative, most desperate, most human thing my mind could do to keep me alive and functional in a situation no child should ever have been in. I am not broken. I am not dangerous. I am not confused about reality. I am a person with a complex trauma history and a mind that responded to that trauma in an extraordinary way, and I am, slowly and imperfectly, and with enormous amounts of therapy and support and grace from the people around me, learning to live as a whole. Not as a single person. I may never be that, and I'm not sure I want to be, but as a whole made of many parts, all of them carrying something, all of them mattering. I felt sick once at the thought of anyone knowing this about me. I felt revulsion. I felt that no one would want to know me. And now I'm here, telling you all of it because somewhere out there is another 16-year-old girl coming home on a Tuesday and being told she rang from a phone box last Saturday and not understanding what that means. Or a 22-year-old in a coffee shop stockroom who is going to be misdiagnosed for years because her doctors don't know what to look for. To that person, you are not losing your mind. You are not making it up. You are not broken. Your mind did the most extraordinary thing it could to protect you, and there is a name for it, and there is help, and you deserve both. I lost 3 years of my life. Not to drugs, not to illness, to strangers who turned out, in the end, to be me. If you or someone you know is affected by dissociative identity disorder or complex trauma, you can find support through the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation at issd.org, or through your GP who can refer you to a trauma specialist service.